Chapter 23 of Going His Way, Little Talks to Little Folks by Rev. Gerald T. Brennan. This recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 23 The First Sleeper. Eutychus. That's a strange name for a boy, isn't it? Well, I'm going to tell you about a boy named Eutychus. I think you'd like to hear his story. Eutychus lived shortly after the time when Jesus was on earth. Time and time again Eutychus heard stories about Jesus. How Jesus walked on the water, how Jesus changed water into wine, how Jesus cured the blind. But the best story of all was the one that his mother told him, how Jesus died for him, and after 3 days Jesus began to live again. Well, one day there was great excitement in the little town where Eutychus lived. St. Paul, one of the apostles, was coming to town. Yes, St. Paul would be in town the next day. The apostle was coming to tell the people about Jesus. Of course, everybody wanted to hear St. Paul. Everybody wanted to hear his stories. Everybody wanted to hear about Jesus. So the next evening a large crowd was on hand to hear the great apostle. The people crowded into a large room, and every place was taken. Did Eutychus go to hear St. Paul? You bet he did. He was right on the job. In fact, Eutychus had a very special seat, a seat where he could see and hear everything. Eutychus sat on a window-sill, right up in the front of the crowded room. Eutychus wasn't going to miss anything. St. Paul began to talk. Oh, he had so many things to say, so many things to tell. Well, he talked and he talked and he talked, and the people listened to every word. It certainly was a long sermon, one of the longest sermons that the saint ever preached. But the people liked it. They came to hear about Jesus, and St. Paul didn't disappoint them. Now there wasn't much air in the room, so after some time it became very warm. There were lots of things that St. Paul said that the boy didn't understand. Eutychus became tired. He became sleepy, too. And what do you think? Eutychus fell asleep. Asleep on his special seat. Asleep on a window-sill in a crowded room. St. Paul paid no attention to the sleeping boy. Neither did the people. The boy should have been home in bed. Instead, Eutychus was sound asleep on the window-sill. All of a sudden there was a terrible commotion. Eutychus lost his balance. He fell out of the window and dropped 3 stories to the street below. Some of the women fainted. Some of them screamed. There was a wild rush for the door. Men and women hurried down the steps, and there on the ground they found the body of Eutychus. "He's dead! He's dead!" the women screamed. St. Paul paid no attention to the excited women. He made his way through the crowd and knelt beside the boy's body. Then Paul raised his hand and the crowd drew back. Every eye was on St. Paul. Every person wondered what the saint would do. St. Paul rubbed the boy's forehead. Then he said some prayers. What happened? Well, nothing happened right away. But in about 5 minutes Eutychus opened his eyes. He looked at the crowd and began to cry. And let me tell you something. Eutychus didn't stay around that crowd very long. No, sir. Where did he go? Eutychus went home. Children, Eutychus was the first boy who ever fell asleep in church. But he wasn't the last one. There have been lots of boys and girls, too, who have fallen asleep in church. Why, every Sunday there are boys and girls who fall asleep. Oh, I don't mean that they close their eyes, but I do mean that by their actions they show that they're asleep to what goes on at the altar. Yes, their souls go to sleep in church. How do you act in church? Do you talk and laugh? When you are at Mass, do you spend your time watching the people instead of the altar? Is your mind on some movie or game? Do you spend your time thinking about where you're going after Mass? If these things are true, then your soul is asleep. You are asleep in church with your eyes wide open. Boys and girls, you come to church to pray, to talk to God. You come to church because Jesus is here. Remember, the church is not a place where you talk to your friends. It's not a place for laughing. You don't come to church to hurt Jesus. This is God's house. This is a house of prayer. Children, when you come to church, behave yourselves. Say your prayers and keep your mind on Jesus every moment. If you do these things, your soul won't fall asleep. End of chapter 23.